Hello, and welcome to How I Hire, the podcast that taps directly into the best executive hiring advice and insights. I'm your host, Roy Notowitz, founder and president of Nota Group Executive Search. Scott Allan served as the CEO of Hydro Flask from 2012 until its acquisition in 2016. In that time, Hydro Flask was named to Inc. magazine's fastest growing private American companies 2 years in a row, as well as to Outside magazine's top 100 places to work. Scott himself was named the 2015 Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year for the Pacific Northwest. Today, Scott acts as the Global General Manager of Hydro Flask, where he oversees the strategy and continued global growth for the brand. Scott will share his experience learning a new industry, scaling quickly, and building a brand from the inside out. A little over 8 years ago, Scott called me out of the blue. I didn't know who he was. He called me from this company called Hydro Flask, which was early stage, and he had some hiring to do. And that's how our relationship started, essentially. And I talked to him a little bit about what he needed, and we put together a proposal. And ever since then, we've been working very closely together to build out the leadership team at Hydro Flask. Scott, thanks today for being on the show. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Roy. Thanks for having me.
Maybe it would be helpful to share a little bit about your career path and how you got to Hydro Flask.
Yeah, I'm kind of an accidental outdoor executive in that I spent 18 years prior primarily in Silicon Valley being a high-tech executive. That was kind of what my career path was in internet and payments and mobile type companies. And I would play outdoors. I'd snowboard, I'd mountain bike, but my career was always in tech. The things I did before I came to Hydro Flask, I was CEO of a company in Australia that did mobile ordering technology for restaurants. Then I was part of a team that was working with Apple to kind of commercialize the Apple Pay technology. So that was that. When I was living in Bend, Oregon, and wanting my kids to grow up in the outdoors and playing outdoors and commuting to the Bay Area, the opportunity to come to Hydro Flask surfaced. And at first looked kind of like a crazy career move and not something I was certain I wanted to do, but it all worked out for the better.
I remember our first outing together. We went to a brew pub, and I just remember the enthusiasm that you had for being in the outdoor industry. And we're really excited to dive in and develop relationships.
Yeah, it's just neat to, the learning that you do right away when you come in. You don't really know anything. As a consumer and as a fan, you can appreciate these brands, but you kind of get the backstage pass to see how these things are built. And yeah, I would completely geek out on going to OR and meeting other executives and getting to kind of see the industry from a different perspective. So yeah, that was a big part of it, is just applying that passion for what I love to do and bring it into building a brand.
You were brought in to scale the Hydro Flask business. It was relatively small when you started. When and how did you figure out what was needed on the leadership team?
Yeah, that was definitely an evolution, because even coming into the business, the discussion with the investors and the board, because the founders had already left the business, and the investment group came and bought the company, and they were looking for a CEO. And I knew two of these investors and board members just were classmates at business school, and we kept in touch. One very much so. We knew each other's weddings and so forth. And I just had to stop and say, guys, if you're hiring me to build a brand because you think I built the brand, I just want you to know I haven't done that. And I don't think you guys have either.
Incredible.
Yeah, just what are we expecting of each other here? Mm-hmm. And they said, well, the founders didn't have a background like that. And they've already, within 3 years, it's between 2 and 3 million in revenue. It's profitable. Now there's a bit more kind of management oversight. There's a professional board. And if we need to get people that have built brands, we can hire them. That's something we can do over time. And so part of it, after 6 months, a year, was just saying, can we go execute a strategy towards creating a brand? And as we got closer to, some of the milestones and things were happening, then, in board meetings, there'd be all these debates around, this would be best for the brand, or maybe this wouldn't, or who knows, and where is this brand, and what's, how do we better understand it? And I was pretty frustrated one day, and the board lead looks at me and goes, what's going on? I said, gosh, none of us have done this, so we don't really know who's right or wrong. We just know who argues the best. And that became the beginning of, okay, I think you're right. There's probably a playbook, there's domain expertise. And I remember just one of the board members like, well, we read a book on this. I said, yeah, but respectfully, I disagree in that, if you spend 20 years in Silicon Valley building technology companies, you can't just read a book and suddenly match that 20 years of experience. And he agreed. So that was the beginning. And we knew it would be such a pivotal and key thing for us to hire the right person, the right fit for the company, the right fit for what we want to do, the ability to work with the board, but really kind of be a cornerstone of brand expertise. And that's, where we started. That's where we ended up meeting here.
And if you think about it, that's been the crux of all of your foundational successes by building the brand. I mean, there's a lot of water bottle companies that are out there, yet Hydro Flask seems to have the biggest, most well-known and best brand.
Yeah, that was the early part of the strategy work that we were doing, and seeing the supply chain and seeing the factories. Even before I joined Hydro Flask, I decided I would do this. I was in China for some of my mobile responsibilities, and when I saw the factories and I just saw the brands I knew and dozens I didn't, and just thinking about this is not really about this technology. It's not. We don't own the factories. We don't own the as much of the intellectual property. It's basically a thermos technology, right? 100-year-old technology. So really the opportunity is around creating a brand. And that started to become the fundamental element of our strategy. And it led to all sorts of, really specific things we did around the hiring process too.
What has shaped your philosophy and approach to hiring once you realized you needed to start getting going with Hydro Flask?
Yeah, I'd say there's like two or three things. One was all the mistakes from the past, just the Silicon Valley experience. You become a manager without a lot of management training. You start to hire without a lot of hiring. And you learn through mistakes. You hire people that seem great in the interview, and 6 months later, 9 months later, they're just not working out. And you're trying to understand, what happened. I think that's part of it. The other piece was things I learned through advisors as we were building the advisory board, which you also helped us with at that time, was just learning how important it is if you're building a brand that people, fit the culture. And as you kind of shape the culture of this is the brand we're building, this is how we build the brand from the inside out by living this culture, how important it is to get the right people that kind of, match that. So not just the expertise and the stage of company, but that kind of culture piece is really important. And then obviously getting expertise that can know a network and can understand our space and can understand the nuances of our business. And I think that's what the Noto Group did well for us, and kind of guide us through the talent pool so that we can find, the right kind of people for us.
How did you develop that knowledge or awareness of what you were looking for and getting crystal clear on that?
Yeah. So part of it was, through back and forth conversations around what is it that we need the person to do? What are the specific competencies that they need to have to be successful coming into this role? And that goes back to some of the mistakes earlier where you hire someone because they're just, wow, it feels like I get along with this person, but you're not finding friends. I mean, you're there to get somebody that you want to see how do they perform in this, work environment, and what are the things they need to do, and what specific competencies do they need to have, and have, demonstrated through this interview process so that they come in and you lower that risk. That was a back and forth, looking at things like OSI, Polaris, competency cards, narrowing it down. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if they were just amazing in all, 50 of these? Yeah, but that's not realistic. So what really matches what we need in this role at this time, and how do we prioritize that? And then that way, if we're looking at candidates just got really great gifts and all these great competencies, but they don't match the ones we're looking for, then it's not really a fit, So that was a really key part. I think the other piece is tied to the size and stage of the company. So we were small. Our first hire, we probably had below 20 people, in the teens, revenue between 5 and 10 million. And so we can hire a great person that has a great background, but maybe at brands that are, $250 million, and could manage a large staff and manage a large budget. And that's how they deliver results. But they would maybe get deer in the headlights coming into a size and stage of company like we were. So part of it is that fit too. What have they done? Can they be player coaches? Can they be hands-on? Can they also scale and build a team and grow and shift towards a different management model? Those were interesting things for us to spend time on.
So thinking about competencies, had you ever used those before at this stage, or was that something that you brought in?
No, we learned that
tech?
Working with you guys. And it was interesting in that the VP of product marketing that we had hired successfully used them at other companies. So as he began to build out his team, that's what he was using. And he showed us even more that we can do with that internally. like using more of a team approach to look at candidates and having different people, tied to maybe their competency, expertise, looking for that in the candidate. So people had specific things they were looking for, specific kind of behavioral questions that kind of go drilling down into, and make sure that it's a fit, not just hiring because, gosh, they snowboard, they mountain bike, they love band, they drink beer, this would be great. These are our people, but maybe they're not the person for the job.
Getting back to looking at people from different size companies and things, you were looking for stuff like initiative or adaptability, learning agility, things that would sort of give evidence that they'd be able to be successful in a smaller, more entrepreneurial.
Yeah, results orientation and kind of accountability around delivering results. So the technical functional expertise, obviously, kind of at table stakes in some of these cases where they need to have that, need to have specific things tied to our business, but then it was more about the softer skills. Yeah, communication. And as the company grew, more and more of it was really around team management, influence, leveraging, kind of being a good team player.
Out of all of our clients, you're probably most notorious for hiring people who are overqualified. I think that says a lot about who you are as a leader, but how has that served you or benefited the company?
Yeah, I think it helped us in a couple ways. And again, it helped that I didn't come from the industry. So I didn't have to have all the answers. I just had to get good at asking the right questions and surrounding myself with really good people. And that's something that we began to do. And I think the other thing that was helpful is that, certainly market fit, timing, window, the fact we were funded, the fact we had kind of a really good head start on what could become, the Hydro Flask brand. And as that really scaled, our searches wasn't just go get a body, go get a person that looks qualified, that we like, throw them in the role. It was like, these are really important, stages for the company. So that would take time. And in the time from where we started working with your team and saying, here's what we're looking for, to getting to candidates, the business may have evolved. And the things that we're working on are a little bit different, a little bit more complicated. So we'd see candidates that maybe looked overqualified to start, and by the time we get through the process are, it's still overqualified, but we're growing into them. And I think that was eye-opening, and that you really have to kind of look down the track a bit too. And if the business felt like it had a pretty high ceiling as to where we could take this, then it's great if you can hire an executive that can scale with it. And there's always an art form to that. You can hire people that are too far off that upper end, and they just can't operate at the reality of your business. There's certainly the risk of building a bigger team. The business can't afford it, and you got to go backwards. Those are all real risks in the business. I think for us, we were fortunate that we'd hire people, and they were initially overqualified, and within a few years, we're putting them to work at the range of their skill set just through the growth we had.
In the recruiting process, to hire overqualified people, you sort of have to sell a bigger vision, right? Credibly. And then when they come in, the reality isn't necessarily that you're even close to that yet. So how did you manage in the hiring process to set expectations appropriately in terms of what reality was at that stage?
We didn't want to fool anybody, have them come in and say, this is not what I signed up for. Be pretty transparent about that. And that was always the piece around, can they get their hands on a bit? They don't have a lot of resources. Some of the executives we hired, and these are our reality. We have this big vision, but we have a lot of little alligator type things, in the weeds right now to deal with. So I think just being transparent, just being honest with people, and, doing the onboarding, pulling them into the team pretty quickly. And then just fun stuff that was around, like the realistic job preview technique that you guys taught us. I remember he's been promoted as a senior vice president of divisional sales, but he was our VP of worldwide sales. His RJP was, how would we go to Canada? What's the right way to take our brand to Canada? We want to focus on premium outdoor distribution. We got to think about logistics. We got to think about the right starting point, the right way to service it, and the economics and everything. And so, Mike came in and did a great job. And I think 3 months later, we were in a meeting and, we're going to Canada. He's like, well, how are we going to go to Canada? And I said, well, we're doing what you said. Please don't tell me that was all a bunch of, what? He goes, no, I was just curious. I'm like, yeah, that's why we hired you. Yeah, that expertise, you impressed us, and it seemed really solid. As the team kind of poked holes in what you presented, everything seemed pretty solid. So, I think if you aim it at here's really the things that we need to be working on, and you're the right person to do it, then gosh, get them in there and start working on that. There shouldn't be too many surprises, ideally.
Yeah, I remember, you had to push the envelope too in terms of trying to get these people on board from a compensation standpoint, and they sort of had to believe in the potential. And, that's a delicate balance because you're moving people and it's a big decision.
Yeah, families, relocating and big, you're right. And I think it just keeps adding and building. And your first executive hire, they're taking a big risk potentially. The second, the third, they start to see part of what they see is the team that's being attracted. And you want to make sure they can all work together. You hire really strong people, then a lot of that needs to be reshaped towards creating a strong team, not just a bunch of strong individuals. And then obviously the investors, the board, that side had to feel comfortable too. And so I think you get through the right process, you eliminate that likability. You talked before about Barry Deutsch's book, You're Not the Person I Hired, where you just, how does this happen? We just kind of on our best behavior, almost seduce each other, and then you get hired and this isn't the same person type of thing. So you get through all that, you kind of know it's the right person. They feel like this is a place I can really apply my talent and skill and make a difference. Then it's a little easier to make those decisions. We're really investing in a capability and a competency and a leader that will help us get to that next level. And if the business really, those are the things you need, then it just kind of solves the next stage of problems.
I remember feeling like success was just inevitable because the people that you had on board were I knew that they could do exactly what you needed to do with 100% confidence. And yet they didn't have, although they were very seasoned, they didn't have huge egos. Coming in and working together with all these very experienced senior level people in the room. How was that from the standpoint of an adjustment when they came in and working together with very strong opinions and things?
It was fun to watch them all gel, to be honest. So having meetings, having offsites. We hired our VP of marketing, and e-commerce, Phyllis Grove. So she came in, and great, just pragmatic, realistic, great chops from the brands that she's been at. And she'd just speak, and you can kind of see everyone kind of looking, giving her a side glance, and the gears whirling, trying to read her, trying to figure out, how the team chemistry is kind of shaping. And that's the other thing. It's like making sure I didn't hire people who are just like me. Right, that we can complement each other, and you have the kind of dreamers and the optimists, you have the realists, and that I think as a leader, your job is to kind of blend all that and to mix that up, because there were so many times where a few of us were just, this is great, this is going to be huge, and we're ready to leave the meeting and just go execute it and start sprinting. And if I wasn't careful, I didn't stop and say either to our then CFO Ellen or to Phyllis or to Dennis in ops and say, whoa, why are you guys all frowning and don't look as excited? They're like, well, do you not see the 15 mines in the minefield and the cliff on the other side of that? It's like, no, you don't see that at all. We just have, this is a great idea. It looks so good on PowerPoint. Blending that really became important for us.
So your job, once you had this great team in place, was it more around maintaining relationships in the industry, building the culture? What were the elements around hiring that you contributed to after you had that team in place?
Part of it was also forcing the conversations up to our level that, weren't happening and needed to. And it wasn't that people were just, not doing what they needed to do. It's just sometimes you can kind of see things developing or hear of things developing, and your job is to have the team confront reality. This is an issue, this is part of our strategy, this is creating this kind of unintended consequence. What are we doing about it? And what are the priorities and what are the issues so things aren't going to fester and start to create silos within the organization? That was part of it. Certainly culture was a big part. Once I hired better people than me in all these functional areas, I took on culture, and that was fun. That was a passion. It's like, how do we reinforce our ability to strengthen our brand from the inside out through our behaviors, through how we make decisions? More and more I learned about that, the more that I just saw it as a really smart thing for us to be doing too.
How did that translate into the candidate experience?
Yeah, I think they would be able to come to Bend, and Bend has a certain vibe and culture, and then they come to our office, and it just feels like it's an incubation space with multiple startups, and it has a lot of energy that people pick up on, and there's a lot of positive elements of that. And if that freaked people out, that might have been a good thing, just kind of screen out those that were like, whoa, this is too much too fast. But for those that kind of tapped into that, then the rest was really just the people that they met and how much they cared about the brand and cared about what we're doing. And I think as we got bigger also, it was that respect of the community and being respectful of the community. Bend's not a giant town. So for an employer like, or brand like Hydro Flask, we move the needle in our community, and we're really thoughtful about how do we give back, how do we show gratitude to the community that helped build our brand in the first place. All the stories of people buying Hydro Flask, shipping to the East Coast as gifts, or evangelizing our brand as like, this is one of our hometown products. You guys have to discover this. That made a difference for us. So we're grateful for that too.
You have a lot of legitimate, authentic outdoor enthusiasts, athletes. Is everyone who works there, do they have to have that level of authenticity as it relates to being an outdoor person?
That's such a great question, because we struggle with that. We'd have people come in and contract temp positions, and then they'd be awesome and they just fit in with the team, but they don't snowboard, they don't mountain bike, they don't paddle in 40-foot surf or whatever that some of our more extreme employees do. And I remember it became a conversation for us, and it started to lead us into a path of, to build our culture, to be part of Hydro Flask. Does it mean we all have to like the exact same things? And that caused us to really think about kind of diversity, equity, inclusion type topics of are we being more inclusive? Is it more about, the way in which they fit culture isn't necessarily tied to an outdoor activity? That a bit of diversity within the ranks is a good thing too.
And have you been able to accomplish that, you think?
We're working on it. We're fortunate that at the vice president level, we're kind of 50-50 male-female. At the director level, we finally just hired our first female director. And it was really kind of eye-opening to do our, VP, director, senior manager, frontline, just gender kind of survey. And it's like, where are all the senior managers and directors? What have we done wrong? And talking across industry and finding out like, well, traditionally, when it comes to childcare, if you can't find it, you can't afford it, somebody takes a back seat career-wise, and then guess who doesn't have 8 or 10 years experience at this certain stage? So that was really eye-opening for us. And we began to say, okay, how do we do our part with this? We're doing the things that take time and doing the things that we feel are good for our community, good for our industry, and it's a priority for us.
Do you do any training on hiring? How do you build that competency at the manager level and director level within the organization?
Yeah, we do. And I think we can keep doing a better job of that. But what does success look like? And then how do we go determine what competencies they have to show to be able to likely achieve that success, realistically? And then who can do what around that team interview process to determine which candidates are strongest and which ones aren't. So we're doing that kind of behavioral training, competencies, and we train our hiring managers around that.
What are some of the hiring mistakes that you've made over the years? And, what are the lessons that you learned from those?
Yeah, so it's been that, sit in the interview, great energy, gosh, they got all the right kind of answers to the questions that you ask. And then 6-9 months later, you're just so frustrated that they're just not taking accountability for what they've been given. They always have reasons why it's not their fault. And you can just kind of see this is a mess. And how did we do this? You hire them because they like how they showed up, but you didn't really get to what they have done and can do or can't do until you see it happen. Because really, you're trying to de-risk this. You're going to hire people and you're going to put them in circumstances that are not ideal. We're going to have challenges. We're going to have pressure. We're going to have disappointment. We're going to have just all the dramas of a bunch of people working together. And how do they react to all those things is really what you're trying to ascertain. And that was that. And then I think the last thing we learned at Hydro Flask is you just have your kind of culture champions that embody the culture, that value it. And I remember one interview, there's a person's like, wow, on paper, they're great. And one person was like, well, I got one concern. And he would be a peer for this person. I said, what's that? And he goes, he never said we, ever. And I don't get the sense like he'd make a great team member. I don't think he'd ever have my back. And that caused us to kind of go back and replay the tape in all of our heads of like, oh, you're kind of right. And I think a bit more reference checking, a bit more looking at it. It's like, whoa, he's not a team player. We were kind of building a culture. We're building a sense of team and family at that point of the company. So getting people to kind of look for that culture fit. And at the time it was more kind of sense and picking up. And then we later got into specific questions that would start to get at areas of our guiding principles and values specifically. But I always think of like the scene in Terminator where the dogs can tell who's like a real human and who's like a Terminator. They start barking like that. Yeah. It's just like those people do great in other companies, not in ours.
I remember also having some challenges and hurdles related to timing with one or two hires because of the acquisition, right? So one of the things I remember is that you were a really great partner in communicating the status of things to us so that we could keep candidates on hold.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was awful. And that, well, just awkward, I should say. And yeah, that was the time that we're being acquired, and it's a publicly traded company. We can't leak this information. We can't even acknowledge it, nothing. And here we have the perfect candidate to bring in, but we can't tell her why we can't, and we also don't necessarily want to, bring her into the company and not tell her these things, right? So, we thought it was any day. It starts to drag on. And I remember, she was kind of like, okay, they're not serious. All the things that you don't want.
Starting to convince herself why she didn't want
and you guys did a great job of like, no, it's this. And no, it's not that now. It's this. Whatever it was, it just kept her like.
I think we were like, oh, they're just finalizing some things.
I don't know how you guys did it. I couldn't come up with anything else to say. And then when finally the news dropped, and I think the first phone call, as soon as it hit the wire, I can reach out and say, we decided to extend you an offer, and I need you to know that this is what's happening, and this is why. It's not like we can't make up our mind. It's not that we're stringing other people along, whatever. We're not even trying to string you along. But we couldn't talk about this. And what a relief. She's like, oh, that's it. Okay. I thought it was,
it was a huge relief.
Yeah. I think for all of us. Yeah. Now we can just get on. And she's like, okay, no, I've been through these things. I'm comfortable. She knew the team, she was ready to pull the trigger too. So, and that's been a great hire for us.
After the initial acquisition and even up to the present, Helen of Troy has kept the majority of the leadership team intact. And I think that's highly unusual. A lot of times when there's acquisitions, there's this element of, cleaning house or moving the leadership team to the next level with new people coming in and things like that. Can you speak to that? Why Helen of Troy has...
Why they've tolerated us for all these years.
and why everyone's stuck around too. I mean, I think it's two sides, right?
Yeah, there's really so many parts of that. And one of it was 3 years into the role, and we're building the team, and things are really coming together. And I'm really happy between the board. Again, we didn't know a lot about building brands. We were all tech people. We knew how to do things quickly. We knew how to be agile, how to make fast decisions, and how to scale things. And so we built an advisory board, started to build a leadership team. Things are really working. If we pick the right priorities, the company could really knock down walls, go make stuff happen. It was really great. You can kind of see this vision being pursued. So when the majority owner pulled me aside one time, goes, I think we're going to put the company up for sale. We're going to do a process, and it'll be great. And he looks at me. He's just, why the long face? Like, you'll do fine in this. It's like, we're just getting the thing going. It's like telling Phil Jackson and the Chicago Bulls after their second championship ring, hey, we're going to sell, move the franchise. Don't worry, nothing will change. So of course, all the concerns around, or we sell the company, or there's new investors, things are going to change. Dynamics going to change.
At that point, you had already grown the revenue by 10 times, though, right?
Yeah, and then it kept going by the time that the transaction happened. But that was one of the things. It was looking at the leadership team. It's like, we're not out, and we get it. Like, the investors were great. They were very supportive. They challenged us. They made us better, as what you'd hope for out of a board. But super supportive. Gave us a space to run the business. So, on one hand, they deserved a good outcome. They deserved to come in and do well, and that was fine. But a part of it was then kind of just like interviewing. They're all on their best behavior. No, we're the ones you want. Like, we're so supportive. We're hands off. They're going to tell you all the great stuff. But what made a difference for us is meeting like the OXO leadership team. They all show up and they're all meeting, but we can't tell who's a Helen of Troy person, who's an OXO person. And we'd be in a division with OXO, a great iconic, housewares brand around design and premium, and 30 years old versus our 10 years old. And you met their senior leaders, and they've been there since before the acquisition. And that was something. They're still, above Chelsea, near Hudson Yards, overlooking the Hudson River, still the same company, still the same culture all these years later. So we saw, like, here's a company that can buy a brand, support it to grow it, but, leave the things alone that needed to be left alone. And that was big for us. And that's how it played out. We certainly had to deliver. We had to do what we needed to do to keep growing the business and be successful. But then suddenly we also had access to more resources that had scale brands and could go after things that were really challenging for us at the time. And that was nice too, is they have people that have done that. They have people that manage those things, and we can just plug into that. At
this point, did you have to re-recruit your team to stay on board, or was there an element of that as well?
There was, I think, in some part excitement. Through that process, you got to tell your story over and over again. it was almost like going on Broadway together. I mean, it's like I would tee it off, and then David would kind of do his thing, and then Mike would do his thing, and then we'd always run out of time because we're all so talkative that they'd look at Dennis and say, okay, here's, check, grizzly old ops leader, been there, done that. They look at Ellen, like they see the numbers are all they're just meticulous and tell she ran a tight shop there too. And so they're like, good, you got all the things. And that became almost fun. It's like, look at us, tell the story, look at the reactions we're getting. We're basically just kind of sharing our strategy and sharing our passion for this brand and where it's going. And as time went on, they'd sit there and track us for 6 months or so, and we're delivering on that, if not more. So I think they enjoyed that. Once the dust settled, then it's like, oh, what have we done? We're part of this bigger company. Things are changing, and I think then all that kind of acceptance of change starts to hit on you, and we work through that. There's so many things that you aren't really issues; they're just in your head that you work through, and I think we did a lot of that quickly as a team and came out the other end.
Did they influence your hiring moving forward? Did that change any of your strategy, philosophy, or ways of hiring?
Not really. What was great about that is we'd have the HR team out from El Paso, and they would look around Bend and kind of look around our office. They're like, wow, this is great what you guys have. And it was good for them to help understand. They took on some of our lower level, recruiting work and done a great job with that too. So I think for them to kind of spend time there was really, really important. And I think in some ways we've influenced, mutually. So they're deploying, Helen of Troy is deploying the competency, models for recruiting and hiring. They're using it for their annual reviews, right? So these are the competencies that are important for you to do well. How are we developing these competencies? Are part of the kind of manager, employee performance review and career development conversations, all things that we were doing. So I think they would look and say, okay, there's some good practice here. Let's not pave over it. Let's borrow from what this company's doing well.
Considering all your experience, what type of advice or tips do you have around hiring that you think are just fundamental?
Yeah, look at it as a process, just the same as if you're trying to get better at, innovating and developing products and bring them to market, or get better at building your digital channel. Like all these things are things you focus on. And I think hiring just gets overlooked as a really important competency. And you can even look at it kind of the whole employee life cycle, from recruiting, attracting talent, the onboarding process, developing people along the way. All that, needs to be prioritized in a business, especially in an outdoor brand or lifestyle brand, where that culture element, that fit element is just so important. So do everything you can to learn about it. Work with good recruiters, learn about competency-based hiring approaches. Yeah, just think about what worked, what didn't. And I think the hard thing is, you can find an amazing candidate, but it's not the right person for your company. So, getting into that, specifics of this is what that person needs to be able to do. This is kind of how we roll in terms of culture. This is what we're looking for. Probably the last piece is just how important that kind of learning and change agility has continued to be as a competency. Because if your business is growing and evolving, you don't really want to hire for the same role every year because you keep outgrowing the person. So getting people in that can be humble and learning still, even though they've done great things, that's turned out to be really important for us as well.
I mean, your bar is super high. Like, we have to work really hard to get people across the finish line with you. So
yeah, and I appreciate we're blessed that way, I think, in that we can. And that's usually one of the first things I tell people at all levels of the company. We have the onboarding lunch, and we tell a lot of the stories of how the brand's been built and how, the language came to be, our purpose to save the world from lukewarm. And obviously that, bottles, yes, but how we do things and kind of the zest for life and what's important is just not going to be left to become lukewarm. It's going to be a priority for us. And we tell them, I said, Bend, Oregon and Hydro Flask, we're blessed. We can attract good candidates. And if it comes down to the people we hire, then, wow, they're pretty special, because not only have they been there, done that, they can do more, but they have the right kind of values and attitude and skill set that we're looking for from a culture fit. And when you think about it that way, we're the lucky ones, right? We're the lucky ones to be able to have people like that move to their families to Bend and sign up to be part of our team.
So, Scott, what is it that you're working on, or what's next for you?
Yeah, so I am coming up on 8 years at Hydro Flask, which is a long, long time. And, the original charter is what the investor owners wanted me to do. Like, let's put this together. Let's work together. Let's have some fun. Let's scale it and we'll sell it. And that's kind of a distant memory now in the past. And, like I said before, we weren't really ready to move on to something different as leaders. We were excited to what Hydro Flask can do. And then the parent company said, we'd really like you guys to stick around for 3 years. And that's come and gone too. I'm on 2 boards, Cairn, outdoor subscription box company, Rumpl here in Portland, makes kind of outdoor and blankets for all. Oregon State University Cascades, I'm on their advisory board, and they're creating an outdoor products degree program. I'm getting involved with that. So I think my future is probably more of the board, advisory board, and working with entrepreneurs that are creating something special. That I really enjoy.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us today about how you hire.
My pleasure, Roy. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to How I Hire. Visit howihire.com for more episodes and details about our show. Sign up for our newsletter to get updates and featured career content. And if you know somebody who might be interested in what you heard today, please share our podcast with them. How I Hire is created by Noto Group, an executive search firm for consumer brands that support healthy, active, and sustainable lifestyles. To learn more about Noto Group, visit notogroup.com or follow us on LinkedIn. This podcast was produced by Anna McLean.